I walked out of the hospital elevator, still clutching the sealed envelope. My late husband's estate attorney had pressed into my hands only 40 minutes earlier. Inside that heavy cream envelope sat the paperwork confirming that Daniel had quietly left me $79 million in a private equity trust and 3 luxury high-rise condos on the Chicago Riverwalk. My name is Elena. I am 31 years old, and I had just spent the morning watching a priest sprinkle dirt onto the casket of the only man who ever made me feel truly seen. I was standing in the hallway of my own townhouse, rain still dripping from the hem of my black wool coat, when I heard my mother-in-law laughing. Not a polite chuckle, a full, belly-deep laugh, the kind reserved for genuinely good news. Before I tell you what I heard behind that living room door, tell me in the comments which city you are tuning in from, and hit that subscribe button if you have ever discovered the people calling themselves family were actually circling you like vultures, because what happened next turned my grief into something sharper than any blade. Daniel died 11 days ago. A brain aneurysm at 34 years old, gone before the paramedics even reached our kitchen. I spent the last week and a half sleepwalking through condolence casseroles and funeral arrangements, numb to the core. I thought my in-laws were staying at my house to help me through the worst days of my life. Instead, I froze in my own foyer, the manila envelope pressed against my chest, listening to voices I had trusted for 7 years plotting my financial execution. It was my brother-in-law Marcus who spoke first. Marcus is 36, a mid-tier financial advisor at a regional wealth management firm in the suburbs, the kind of man who wears a Rolex knockoff and calls himself a vice president because his business card technically says so. His firm was one missed quarter away from going under, and everybody in the family politely pretended otherwise. Daniel was such an idiot, Marcus said, the clink of a whiskey tumbler punctuating his words. Leaving Elena with that mortgage, that car note, and barely any life insurance. She is going to lose everything by Christmas. My mother-in-law Vivian chimed in, her voice warm with something that was absolutely not grief. That is why we have to move tonight, sweetheart. Before the shock wears off. Before she starts thinking. You know how she gets when she starts thinking. I gripped the hallway console table. Vivian had handpicked me as the daughter she never had the first time Daniel brought me home to the North Shore. She hosted my bridal shower. She hemmed my wedding dress. And she was standing in my living room, hours after burying her own son, coaching her other son on how to rob his widow blind. My sister-in-law Rachel joined in next. Rachel is 29, a self-declared wellness influencer with 200,000 followers and not a single real income stream. Her voice was syrupy sweet and absolutely merciless. Once Marcus has power of attorney, we can finally move her into that cute little studio in Rogers Park. She does not need this whole townhouse. And honestly, Mom, she was never really one of us. She was just the girl Daniel happened to marry. My father-in-law Harold grunted in approval. She is an auditor. She works with numbers all day. She will read whatever we put in front of her and miss the important clauses because she will be too busy crying. Trust me, grief turns even sharp women stupid. I stood in the shadow of my own hallway, the blood draining from my face and then rushing back in a tide of something colder than fury. They thought Daniel had left me penniless. They thought I was a soft, sentimental little thing who would sign anything they placed in front of me. But Harold had made one critical miscalculation. I was not just any auditor. I was a senior forensic auditor at one of the largest internal audit firms in the Midwest, and I had spent the last 7 years building cases against executives who thought they were smarter than the paper trail. Grief did not turn me stupid. Grief turned me surgical. I looked down at the envelope in my hands. $79 million. 3 riverfront condos. Enough ammunition to bury them financially with a single phone call. But kicking them out onto my porch would be too clean. Too fast. They wanted a game. I was going to let them play. And I was going to let them sign their own indictments in ink they chose themselves. I took a slow breath, pinched my wrist hard enough to redden my eyes, and pushed the living room door open with a performance Meryl Streep would have applauded. The laughter stopped, the instant the hinges creaked. The transformation was grotesque. Vivian lunged off the couch and enveloped me in a perfumed hug, her voice dripping with manufactured sorrow. Oh, honey, my sweet girl. We were just sharing memories of Daniel. Come sit. Let us take care of you. I buried my face in her cashmere shawl so she would not see my jaw lock. I could smell the Pinot Grigio on her breath, the same wine she had been sipping while planning my eviction. Rachel rushed over and squeezed my shoulder with her perfectly French manicured hand. You are not alone, sis. We are family. We handle this together. Marcus stepped forward, adjusting the cuffs of a suit I happened to know he financed through a buy now pay later app. He wore the solemn expression of a man who had rehearsed this moment in a mirror. Elena, I hate bringing this up tonight, but as the oldest man in this family now, I have to protect you. I looked up at him with glassy, trembling eyes. Protect me from what, Marcus? He sighed heavily, like a doctor delivering a terminal diagnosis. I did some digging into Daniel's accounts last week. I wanted to get ahead of it so you would not have to worry. Elena, it is bad. He was underwater. There are creditors already calling. They are going to come for this house within 30 days. I let out a small, strangled sob and covered my mouth. Harold leaned in from the armchair where he used to bounce his grandnieces on his knee. We always suspected, honey. Daniel talked a big game, but we knew his consulting firm was not what he pretended. You are the one left holding the bag now. Marcus reached into a leather portfolio and produced a thick stack of papers bound with a single red clip. But I have a solution. Because of my position at the firm, I can shield your assets. I drafted an emergency durable power of attorney. It gives me temporary authority to negotiate with creditors, restructure the mortgage, and keep this roof over your head while you grieve. He slid the document across my coffee table, right next to the coaster ring Daniel had left on Sunday morning. He offered me a silver pen. Just sign it, Elena. Let me carry this for you. I stared at the paper. It was a full transfer of financial autonomy. Every account, every asset, every decision. A real widow signing this would be handing the keys of her life to a man who was 2 missed rent payments from going under himself. But here is what Marcus, with all his finance bro bravado, never bothered to ask. 3 years ago, after my firm worked a case involving the identity theft of a recently widowed client, Daniel and I had driven together to our estate attorney and registered something very specific. We legally documented 2 versions of my signature. The first was my real one. The second was a deliberate variant, a decoy, missing the final upswing on the letter A and tilted 15 degrees to the left. We filed it with the trust, with our bank, and with the Illinois Department of Financial Regulation as a compromised signature flag. Any document executed with that version would automatically trigger a federal fraud review and would be considered signed under duress or deception, rendering it void and criminally actionable against whoever presented it. I picked up the silver pen. I made my hand shake just enough. I let one real tear fall, because thinking about Daniel still hurt more than anything his family was doing. Marcus, Vivian, Rachel, and Harold leaned in like wolves at a feeding trough. Thank you, I whispered. Thank you for taking care of me. Then I pressed the pen to paper, flattened the A, dropped the upswing, and signed my death warrant for them, across every page of that power of attorney. Marcus snatched the papers the instant I finished, a smile flickering across his face before he smoothed it back into brotherly concern. Do not worry about a thing, Elena. I will handle it from here. The moment the brass clasp on his portfolio clicked shut, the room shifted, warmth drained from every face. Vivian refilled her wine glass without offering me water. Rachel stood, stretched, and walked straight down my hallway toward my bedroom. I heard drawers opening, hangers scraping, a jewelry box being set down on my bathroom counter with zero attempt at stealth. What is she doing? I asked softly, maintaining the fragile widow mask. Vivian did not even look up from her glass. Being useful for once. Funerals cost money. Rachel is pulling a few of your designer items to liquidate. We have to cover the arrangement somehow since Daniel did not plan properly. Rachel emerged a few minutes later, cradling my vintage Cartier tank watch, the Bulgari necklace Daniel gave me on our 5th anniversary, and my grandmother's pearl drop earrings, which had survived 2 world wars and were not technically designer at all. She dumped them into a tote bag with the carelessness of someone packing gym clothes. These will go to a consignment place in Lincoln Park tomorrow. Whatever we clear, we will put toward the mortgage. You are welcome. I said nothing. I did not tackle her. I did not scream. I let her take the jewelry because it was decorative scaffolding compared to what I was about to do to their entire lives. Harold stood up and cast a shadow over my end of the couch. Let this be a lesson, Elena. We told you Daniel was a dreamer. You should have married a real producer. Look at Marcus. He is going places. And you are about to be on the street. Family saves you anyway. Marcus puffed out his chest and placed a hand on his father's shoulder like they were posing for a campaign poster. I lowered my head into my hands, feigned a shudder, and under the cover of my arms, slid my phone from my pocket. I opened the encrypted messaging app Daniel, and I had set up for sensitive communication with my estate attorney, a woman named Patricia Lindholm, whose bulldog reputation in the Chicago probate bar was well earned. I typed 3 lines. Trap set. Power of attorney signed with the compromised signature, currently in Marcus Klein's possession. Execute full trust consolidation immediately. Pull the lease roll for 310 North Wacker, floor 21. I hit send. The check mark appeared. I slid the phone back into my pocket and lifted my tear-streaked face. Rachel was zipping her tote. Marcus was patting his portfolio. Vivian was pouring a second glass. They looked at me like carrion. They did not realize I had just locked them inside a cage, woven from their own greed. 40 minutes later, the front door clicked shut behind them. I watched through the curtain as Marcus loaded Rachel's tote of stolen jewelry into the back of his leased SUV. Rachel reapplied lip gloss in the visor mirror. Vivian and Harold climbed into their Lexus without looking back at the house even once. The moment their taillights rounded the corner, every trembling muscle in my body relaxed. I walked to the security panel, armed the perimeter, double-locked the front door, and pulled up the voice memo app on my phone to confirm the hidden recorders in the living room had captured every syllable of their performance in crystalline stereo. They had. Then I called Patricia directly. She answered on the first ring. Elena, I received your message. The trust consolidation is already moving through the Federal Clearinghouse. By tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. Central, you will be publicly registered as the sole beneficiary of the Klein Vasquez Private Trust. Net worth update will process automatically. Your name will appear on the public Cook County Registry as owner of record for all 3 Riverwalk properties. Are you sure you want to move this fast? I walked into my kitchen and poured myself a tall glass of ice water. Execute everything tonight, Patricia, and tell me about 310 North Wacker, floor 21. I heard her keyboard clicking. The tenant is Klein Strategic Wealth Advisors, registered to 1 Marcus Klein. He is 67 days behind on a base rent of $41,000 per month. The previous management group granted him a verbal grace period because he promised them a capital infusion by the end of this week. There is also a penalty clause in Section 9, Paragraph 4 of his lease. Any tenant more than 60 days delinquent can have their rent retroactively tripled, late fees applied at maximum, and a 5-day notice to cure issued before commercial lockout. I set my glass down on the marble counter and smiled for the first time since the hospital called me 11 days ago. It was not a happy smile. It was the smile of a woman who had just been handed a loaded weapon by a man she planned to aim it at. Patricia. Draft the tripled rent notice. Apply every penalty in the clause. Demand payment in full within 72 hours. Have a process server tape it to his office door at 8 a.m. sharp tomorrow. If he does not cure by Friday at close of business, I want a full commercial lockout, asset seizure, and server hold. And Patricia, one more thing. The servers inside that office almost certainly contain unencrypted records of every one of his transactions. I want those preserved as evidence under chain of custody the moment we take possession. Patricia exhaled slowly. Elena, you understand what you are asking me to execute. I took a sip of water. I am asking you to let a man who tried to steal my home lose his business on a technicality his own lawyer wrote. Patricia, execute. 2 days passed. Marcus did not call. I knew he was too busy scrambling at a bank somewhere, trying to leverage the forged power of attorney against one of my home equity lines. I let him run. On the morning of the third day, my doorbell rang at 9:45. I pulled up the security tablet and saw Marcus pacing my porch, drenched in sweat despite the cold November air, with Rachel beside him and a short, puffy-faced man in an off-the-rack suit clutching a dented briefcase. I opened the door wearing my bathrobe, hair in a messy bun, eyes deliberately puffy. "What is going on?" Marcus pushed past me without waiting for an invitation. Rachel and the stranger followed. I closed the door, tapped the discreet button on my phone that activated the hidden high-definition cameras embedded in my smoke detectors, and followed them into the living room. The stranger cleared his throat. "Mrs. Elena, my name is Howard Reed. I am legal counsel for your brother-in-law and his firm. We are here regarding a substantial outstanding debt your late husband left unresolved." Marcus threw a single sheet of paper on my coffee table and slammed his hand down on it. "Daniel borrowed $1.6 million from my firm's operating capital 18 months ago to keep his consulting company afloat. Here is the promissory note." I picked up the paper with shaking hands. It was laughable. The amortization schedule violated basic math. The stated interest rate exceeded Illinois usury limits. And Daniel's signature at the bottom looked like it had been traced from a birthday card with a shaky hand, which, incidentally, was exactly what had happened. $1.6 million, I whispered. "Marcus, I do not have anything close to that." He leaned across the coffee table, so close I could count the sweat beads on his temple. "Elena, you have this house, and thanks to the power of attorney you signed, I have full legal authority to liquidate it by end of week to satisfy the debt. But I am not a monster. I will cut you a deal. Wire me every dollar of liquid savings you have by tomorrow morning, and I will hold off on forcing the sale for another 30 days. It was extortion, performed in high definition, on camera, with a federally compromised document as the lever. I stared at Marcus and forced my lower lip to quiver. "Marcus, how did your firm even have $1.6 million in liquid capital to lend? You are not a lender. You are a wealth advisor. Your compliance office would have flagged that outflow in a week." Marcus's ego, which was the largest and most combustible thing in my living room, ignited instantly. "You do not understand high finance, Elena. You count beans for a living. I move money." He stood up and took a slow lap around my area rug, bragging to me, to Rachel, to Howard, and unwittingly to 3 hidden cameras and 2 audio recorders. When Daniel came to me, I could not just write a check. Compliance would have flagged it, so I set up 3 shell LLCs in Nevada. I inflated the asset base of 2 of my managed client portfolios. I borrowed against those inflated valuations through a friendly commercial lender. Then I bounced the funds through 2 separate banks across state lines before funneling them to Daniel. Totally clean on my end. Totally invisible. My heart did a quiet, triumphant somersault. Bank fraud through inflated client portfolios. Self-dealing with managed assets. Wire fraud across state lines. Each one carried a maximum federal sentence of 20 years. He had just confessed to 3 separate felonies at the volume of a man ordering coffee. Howard shifted uncomfortably. "Marcus, perhaps we should not discuss proprietary methods." Marcus waved him off. "She is a grieving widow, Howard, not the SEC. Relax." Rachel tossed her hair. "Honestly, Elena, you should be thanking him. He broke rules for Daniel. Now pay him back." I let a long breath out. Okay, Marcus. You win. I cannot lose this house. I will go to the bank tomorrow morning and drain my savings. Just promise me I keep the townhouse." Marcus patted my shoulder with condescending warmth. "Noon tomorrow. Wire hits my account by noon, and you keep your roof. See? Family takes care of family." They left 20 minutes later. I watched them drive off and then called Patricia. "We have the confession on tape. File the federal complaint with the FBI field office tonight. And I want to talk to Agent Delgado personally before close of business." Agent Mariela Delgado of the FBI Financial Crimes Task Force had worked 2 corporate fraud cases with my firm in the past 3 years. She took my call within the hour. I sent her the audio file and the video file. She called me back 40 minutes later. Elena, this is the cleanest confession I have seen all quarter. We need 48 to 72 hours to prepare the warrants. In the meantime, tell me what you need. I told her. She laughed, which I had never heard her do on a work call. Consider it done. We will meet him at the bank. The next morning, Marcus walked into a midtown branch of a national bank clutching his portfolio and the forged power of attorney. He sat down with a senior loan officer and demanded a $400,000 cash advance against the equity in my townhouse. The moment the officer entered my social security number into the system, the federal fraud flag I had preemptively activated with the help of Agent Delgado lit up like the 4th of July. Bank protocol mandated he play along. The officer smiled, processed Marcus's paperwork, and informed him that due to the high dollar value, funds would clear in 72 hours pending federal review. Marcus walked out of that bank believing he had just secured his rescue. What he had actually done was hand Agent Delgado the last piece of physical evidence she needed for an indictment. That night, Rachel posted a 17-minute Instagram Live. She sat on her white boucle couch with her hair perfectly tousled and her eyes artfully damp. She told her 200,000 followers that her sister-in-law had suffered a grief-induced psychotic break, was hallucinating wealth, and had refused to repay a generous family loan. She said her parents were filing an emergency petition to have me declared mentally incompetent so they could protect the family's remaining assets. Comments poured in. My extended in-laws I had hosted for Thanksgivings sent me messages calling me heartless. A woman I had mentored at my firm sent me a cautious text asking if I was okay. I did not respond to any of it. I put my phone in a drawer and opened my laptop instead. For the next 2 days, while Rachel ran her smear campaign and Marcus sweated through the 72-hour federal review, I pulled every single public filing associated with Marcus's firm. I cross-referenced his reported assets under management with the actual SEC Form ADV disclosures. I pulled the Nevada Secretary of State registrations for his 3 shell LLCs and traced them back to a Delaware parent entity he had set up 5 years earlier. I found evidence of client account churning, unauthorized margin trading, and what looked like at least 2 separate instances of using elderly client funds to cover margin calls on his personal trades. It was not just fraud, it was a fully operational Ponzi structure dressed up in a golf polo. I packaged everything into a single indexed PDF and sent it to Agent Delgado with a polite note that read, "Additional reading for your Friday." Vivian and Harold filed the emergency guardianship petition that Friday afternoon. They were required, per Illinois probate rules, to submit their own financial disclosures under penalty of perjury. What they did not know was that their disclosures would land on the same federal judge's desk as Agent Delgado's indictment package for Marcus. What they also did not know was that Patricia had already arranged for me to attend the guardianship hearing with a very specific manila folder tucked under my arm. The hearing was scheduled for Tuesday morning at the Daily Center. I walked in wearing a charcoal suit and carrying a single leather portfolio. Vivian, Harold, Rachel, and Howard Reed were already clustered at the petitioner's table, along with a gaunt man in a frayed sport coat, who I later learned was a psychiatrist named Dr. Bennett Harlow, known in certain Chicago legal circles as a paid diagnosis for hire. Marcus was noticeably absent. Agent Delgado and her team had served him his arrest warrant at 6:30 that morning at his condo in River North. He was currently sitting in federal, holding on the 23rd floor of the Dirksen building 4 blocks away, though his family had not been told yet. Judge Monroe called the court to order. Howard Reed rose and delivered his opening statement with the confidence of a man who believed he was prosecuting a helpless widow. He described my erratic behavior, my refusal to honor my late husband's legitimate business debts, and my paranoid accusations against a loving family member. He called Dr. Harlow to the stand. Dr. Harlow, under oath, testified that based on second-hand accounts provided by Vivian and Harold, I was suffering from acute grief-induced delusional disorder and was incapable of managing my own affairs. He had never met me. He had never examined me. He stated this under oath anyway. Judge Monroe turned to me. "Mrs. Elena, You are representing yourself. Do you have a response? I stood and opened my portfolio. Your Honor, I would like to enter 3 exhibits into evidence. Exhibit A. I handed the bailiff a certified document from the Cook County Recorder of Deeds and the Illinois Department of Financial Regulation, confirming my status as sole beneficiary of a trust valued at $79,200,000 and of the department as a lead of cum $1,000, along with the deeds to 3 commercial properties on the Chicago Riverwalk, all dated and filed the Monday following my husband's funeral. The judge read the document. Her eyebrows climbed her forehead. Vivian's wine-flushed cheeks drained to paper white. Rachel covered her mouth with both hands. Harold made a small choking sound. Exhibit B, Your Honor. I handed up the forged power of attorney, along with a certified copy of the signature variant affidavit Daniel and I had filed 3 years earlier with the state. This document was used 2 days ago at a federally insured bank to attempt the withdrawal of $400,000 against my townhouse. The signature on this document matches a variant my late husband and I legally registered as a compromised signature fraud flag in 2023. Submitting this document to a federally insured institution constitutes bank fraud under Title 18, Section 1344. Howard Reed turned the color of raw dough and sank into his chair. Judge Monroe's jaw tightened. And Exhibit C, Your Honor. I gestured toward the back of the courtroom. The double doors opened, and Agent Delgado walked in wearing her dark navy suit and her federal badge clipped to her belt. This is Special Agent Mariela Delgado of the FBI Financial Crimes Task Force. She is prepared to testify regarding the current federal investigation into Marcus Klein, Vivian Klein, and Harold Klein, and regarding an audio recording captured legally in my home 3 days ago, in which Marcus Klein confessed on camera to bank fraud, wire fraud across state lines, and attempted extortion of a grieving widow. Vivian made a sound somewhere between a gasp and a scream. Harold slumped forward, both hands on the table. Rachel turned to her mother and hissed, loud enough for the entire courtroom to hear, "Mom, you said he said it was handled." Vivian snapped back. "Shut your mouth, Rachel. They do not have anything on you yet." Rachel stood up. Yet? Yet? You told me to post that Instagram live. You told me exactly what to say." Harold grabbed Vivian's wrist. Vivian shook him off. Howard Reed quietly picked up his briefcase and tried to slide toward the aisle. Judge Monroe slammed her gavel 3 times. "Sit down, Mr. Reed. Petitioners, sit down. This court is dismissing the guardianship petition with prejudice. I am referring all petitioners to the state's attorney for perjury and potentially for conspiracy charges. Dr. Harlow, you will be reported to the Illinois Department of Professional Regulation by end of day. Agent Delgado, the floor is yours." Agent Delgado stepped forward. "Your Honor, Marcus Klein was arrested this morning at 6:30 a.m. on federal charges of bank fraud, wire fraud, and violation of federal securities law. Based on new evidence presented today, I am requesting authorization to also arrest Vivian Klein and Harold Klein on charges of conspiracy to commit fraud and subornation of perjury. Rachel Klein is under active investigation for defamation and conspiracy, and I am requesting that she surrender her passport by end of business today." 2 federal marshals had materialized at the back of the courtroom during Agent Delgado's statement. They walked down the center aisle. Vivian began to sob, the kind of ugly, furious sobbing that had nothing to do with remorse. Harold did not resist. Rachel tried to bolt for the side door, where a 3rd marshal had quietly positioned himself. She made it 3 steps before she was informed she was not under arrest yet but would be surrendering her passport within 6 hours or an arrest warrant would follow. She collapsed into her chair and began screaming at her mother that this was all her fault, that Marcus had promised the money would clear, that Vivian had told her the Instagram post was a great idea. Vivian screamed back that Rachel had always been the weak link, that Rachel had spent 15 years sponging off the family, and that if Rachel had just kept her mouth shut, they would have gotten away with it. I sat at my table and watched a family that had been welded together by 40 years of favoritism and quiet cruelty come apart in under 4 minutes. The Golden children were eating each other. The patriarch was staring at his lap. The matriarch was spitting venom at her own daughter. I had not said a word. I did not need to. Judge Monroe dismissed the court. I walked out of the Daily Center, down Dearborn Street, and into a coffee shop where my best friend Priya was waiting with a latte and a look that said she wanted every single detail. Priya was the only person I had told. She was my college roommate, now a prosecutor for the Illinois Attorney General's office, and she had been the one who helped me verify Agent Delgado's contact protocols the night of the funeral. She hugged me for a long time, and then she slid the latte across the table and said, "Tell me everything," I told her. She cried once, during the part where I described Vivian hugging me in the foyer. Otherwise, she just nodded and held my hand. 8 months have passed. Marcus was convicted on all counts and is currently serving 11 years in a federal penitentiary in Terre Haute, Indiana. His firm was liquidated. His clients were made whole through a restitution fund established by the court. Vivian and Harold pleaded guilty to conspiracy to commit fraud and each received 3 years of federal probation, 5 years of supervised financial reporting, and $180,000 in restitution payments that forced them to sell their North Shore home and move into a 2-bedroom rental in a suburb they had mocked for 30 years. Rachel lost every brand sponsorship within a week. Her follower count dropped by 60% when the court transcripts leaked. She now works as a receptionist at a wellness spa in Rogers Park, which is, with no small amount of irony, the neighborhood she once picked out for my exile. Howard Reed was disbarred. Dr. Harlow lost his license. Nobody in that family has my current phone number, and nobody ever will. I sold the townhouse. Too many ghosts. I moved into one of the Riverwalk condos Daniel left me, the one on the 29th floor with the view of the Wrigley building lit up gold at dusk. I kept my job at the audit firm because I loved it, and because a $79 million trust does not replace the quiet dignity of work that matters. Priya comes over most Fridays. We drink wine. We watch old movies. Sometimes I cry about Daniel. She lets me. Last week I walked past a flower shop on Michigan Avenue and saw a bouquet of white peonies, which were Daniel's favorite. I bought them and carried them home. I put them in the crystal vase he gave me for our 2nd anniversary and set them on the kitchen counter next to a framed photo of the two of us at Lake Geneva on our honeymoon. I stood there for a long time and I talked to him. I told him that his family had shown me exactly who they were the night of his funeral, and that I had listened. I told him that I had used every tool he helped me build and every skill I had earned on my own, and I had made sure that not one of them would ever touch a single dollar of what he left behind. I told him I was okay. I told him I missed him. And then I poured myself a glass of wine and watched the sun set over the river. Blood does not obligate you to stay at a table where you are the main course. Family is the people who would still show up for you if you had nothing to leave them. If the people at your dinner table are measuring your future before your body is cold, you are not their family. You are their inheritance. And you are allowed to pull the whole estate out from under them. If anyone listening to this has ever had to quietly walk away from relatives who treated you like a resource instead of a person, tell me your story in the comments. And remember that choosing your own peace is never a betrayal of anyone who truly loved you. Subscribe for more stories of women who stopped shrinking to fit other people's convenience. My name is Elena. I was 31, I was a widow, and I was absolutely done being underestimated.